Mr. Dutta is a design nomad and venture advisor at SAIF Partners. Sorry. Okay, right. SAIF Partners and former head of UX for Flipkart and Adobe. In his current role, Jay defines delightful experiences and creates user-centric cultures across SAIF's portfolio companies, which include both successful and promising young startups. For over half a decade, Jay has led the UX practice at Adobe India across its products and interfaces. Recently, his multifaceted design team has audited and rethought the UX for Flipkart's consumer and seller-facing digital touchpoints, especially for mobile. Would you like to take over and introduce the rest of your panel?
Sure. So before I introduce the panel, I have a very quick small presentation for you guys just to put things in context. I think in the last panel, what you saw was that we had a discussion and the slides going on, which is also great. I thought this might probably help you guys just to sort of rationalize how or what we are talking about. Very quickly, can I have a show of hands? How many designers in the room? Okay, that's a minority. And how many designers or non-designers or everyone in the room, how many of you work for early stage startups? Okay, the number's growing. And how many of you are part of larger corporations, MNCs and so on? Okay, brilliant. So I guess a lot of you anyway know about design and tech in context, but I thought this is a very, very quick premiere for some of you just to locate our conversation. Please don't be shy, please tweet away. Happy to sort of answer some of your questions over tweets because we might not have the time to answer all the questions here in this forum. We'll have this very short intro. We will have the panel talking about it and we'll open it for Q&A, though that number will shrink because we don't have much time to do many Q&As. Very quickly, when I look back, when I graduated from design school, these were the kind of roles the designers did. And I'm talking about many, many years back, almost closer to 2 decades kind of thing. While doing something like this is like 99, I realized that none of this was possible. As a graphic designer, I could not do that. And that's when I realized that I needed to learn how to code. And I coded this, and this is again 2000, went to the UK, did a lot of work there. But remember, this was still 2000, and everything in technology was still kind of booting up. So you would have to wait for days, or not days rather, for minutes and minutes for a web page to load up. And that was how technology was going. But what was amazing was the fact that a graphic designer who worked so much in print could actually put his or her site up and it could be seen. So I was in Mauritius then. I learned coding in South Africa. And here was in tiny little island of Mauritius, which most people have not even heard of. And you could see or show your work to the entire world out there, which was like amazing. I mean, in print, you didn't have that. And that was the sort of way technology really worked. And when I looked back, I think there were newer sort of roles coming in. Suddenly you had web designers and people would say, hey, there are multimedia designers. That is no longer there anymore, or is it there, kind of, right? So I think there are new sort of things coming in. When I started working in the UK, these were the kind of phones which were taking shape. And we would be talking about how you would get SMS every time you made a transaction, and that was like, wow, it was so new age. Nowadays, we say, please, to hell with notification. We don't want another notification kind of thing, right? These were some of the, if you look at the proliferation of phones pre-iPhone, I think that's such a huge range of things that you tend to see. Then I worked in a whole bunch of things like CRM systems and so on, which is a lot of it is a back end, and you're trying to design systems as opposed to designing the front end part of things. And when I looked back at that, I think you had a bunch of new roles. Part of what design was doing was borrowing from other sort of roles, like architects, for example. Now design has had an architect sort of fixed at the end. You were borrowing from finance, like analysts. You could do usability analysis of things. So I think we were doing our nature of what we did was changing as well. When I look at this, I think Infosys came in, and some of our panelists here today have ex-Infosys background in the 80s. I think design as a service also got introduced. So for the first time, kind of you began to see that we were even outsourcing design. The consequences were not always happy, but I think it was fun to see design getting outsourced, just like tech got outsourced, and it was a bit crazy. But increasingly, design moved. So from design as a service or as a component, it became a competency. And this is what we are seeing now today. I think in the panel previously, you saw a lot of speakers talking about that. How can we move design from a component level to a competency level? And I think this is what we will be talking about and borrowing from the experience of our speakers here. I have a very simple theory, and my panelists may not agree with me, or you guys may not agree, which is perfectly good. I think everything starts with the technology. So printing started as a tech. If you see the background, it's actually an art. Artists stretch it to some other extreme. Same thing happens with typography. Typography is a technology. Same thing happens with photography. It is a technology. And with web and HTML. If I remember in 2000, the way people were stretching the boundaries of HTML, some of them were using also ActionScript. Flash was the king. Japanese musicians doing some very interesting stuff. They're not selling things. They're not necessarily doing in transactions, but they're just pushing the boundaries of the web per se. I think somewhere, and this is my belief, is that design sits in the middle. I mean, it makes tech edible. That's what it does. But our panelists may have a different point of view, and we'd love to sort of hear that as soon. And this is probably where we have ended up with. These are sort of a lot of things which 15 years, 20 years ago, you would not have seen these kind of titles at all. I'm a designer in a VC firm, which is very weird if you think about it, because 15, 20 years ago, the name itself would have been probably unheard of largely. And this is probably where we are moving towards. I think I'll see more people joining VC firm, more designers influencing other startups and other companies. This is a very brief in what I do. Essentially, work with a whole lot of people on embedding design in their startups. But briefly, again, just to put the context back, I think we are working in a world where digital ubiquity is becoming standard. I mean, I don't think, this is 2013, I don't think it will be very surprising if your kidneys or pancreas or some other part of your body starts texting you or sending you messages to take care of it. I think that's very much a possibility. Digital ubiquity, India especially, our toilets still outnumber phones and will continue to do so. However, whatever we may say about various other schemes, I think this is the other one. So design essentially isn't what it used to be, especially if you look at India. I think everyone's got a little smart computer in their hands, camera. It's eating up so many other sort of 3D devices which you've thought about. And UX for mobile is very complicated. I think it's not easy. I don't think many of you will be able to see what our man down there is doing, but I think, it is like constrained in many ways, but it's like really crazy. And it's very hard to adopt some of the skills that you typically do on other devices for mobile, because it's almost like a very different medium entirely kind of thing. And that's going to be a pervasive way of doing things. And then we have the whole lot of things, which is big data, thick data, ambient computing. I forgot to put IoT there. You have chatbots, you have voice. I think our input mechanisms are changing. And as tech, I think we are still chewing on it. As design, we still have a long way to digest it. But I think, we are making some progress there. So I think if you look confused, I think it's understandable. So essentially, design makes tech edible. That's my broad thought. But let's see what our panelists have to say, whether they have a different point of view. So let me welcome on stage Nitin Sethi. Nitin is the Vice President of Design at Quikr. He has been working in design for a long time. He was working earlier with Naukri. He has an interesting, and I will probably be quizzing you a bit on that, on the area of from art to a bunch of different degrees that you've had or sort of short-term courses that you've taken. I think very interesting, business, tech, all of that. Deepika, please welcome on stage. Deepika had CX. And Deepika essentially is also got a very interesting background. She is from the art side. And by the way, we were in keeping with design empathy, what we're talking about. We were sitting at the last row, and I realized that none of you can see people who are sitting here. So I've asked the panelists to stand up, and I hope that should be good. Panelists, sorry about that, but we'll. So Deepika also very interestingly does street art. She's an artist at heart and a UXer, CXer by her work. So I think we'll love to sort of hear some of the stuff. Savy? Savy's been in a bunch of things. He heads design at Moonraft, which is a Bangalore-based company. And Savy actually has a bunch of other interests as well, like all of our panelists here, which makes them very well-rounded. Savy had taken a break to do his own boutique resort in Wayanad. Some design thinking there, I'm sure. He's been sort of in Infosys, you've been in IBM, so I think you've gone through all of that. So over to you guys. You have your mics here, you can go behind the chairs if you guys want to. Yeah, you're good? Okay, great. Do you want to sort of have a very quick, I gave you a little fun introduction, but do you guys want to do a quick, more functional introduction to you guys, what you do, your role? Maybe a couple of 30-second introduction.
Hi, I'm Nitin. I head product design and user experience at Quikr. I joined Quikr 16 months back to establish a UED practice at Bangalore headquarters. Prior to that, I worked with a company called Yatra. I spent 8.5 years with Naukri.com group, established Naukri, 99 Acre Shiksha, worked with startups like Bharti Airtel, launched Airtel, moved to India Times e-commerce and Dative. So from heart of it, I'm a startup guy. I like to be in the fire and don't like job security. So the feeling of getting fired is good with me.
Hi everyone, I'm Deepika. So I'll kind of step back what I'm currently doing to how actually it all started. So like a typical design pass-out student, I started with an advertising agency, worked with few of the big names out here. And after trying my hands, I moved to a digital stream, which is with Web Chutney. I tried my hands because at that time, .com was something which was a big name out there. And everybody wanted to move from inches and all meters, doing all the print work, centimeters to pixels. So that is what I started doing. And after doing that, I moved to more services-based companies, have explored different UB Group company, which was Vijay Mallya's IT organization. And then there was Global Logic and others. And now I'm working with DMI as a CX head for India location. And we are catering to customers based in UK, US, and across the world. And we are doing some exciting and real interesting work out there. Here you go, sir.
Thank you, Deepika. Hey, my name is Savy, and I head design for Moonraft Innovation Labs. Moonraft is a design and innovation company, and we've been around for about the last 6 to 7 years. We are a 100-member company and around 40% mix of designers and the rest design engineers. I think this topic is then so very relevant for us because we are people who deliver design to companies in the form of tech. So we'll come to that. Prior to that, I've been with IBM, Infosys, and Emphasis, where I learned the tricks, and a very similar set of experiences that our colleagues have mentioned. But the thing that gave me a real reboot is when I took this break in 2012 to do something that is really at the heart. Basically I love architecture and real experience in setting up stuff and furniture and all that. So I took that plunge, set up this resort, and when I came back, and I went through the whole rigor of architecture to detailing and then establishing it, seeing it come alive brick by brick. And when I came back to job with Moonraft, right, I mean, I had a much wider perspective of how things should be and how the world looks at design and solutions. So I think that's the story I keep telling designers. We encourage people to take a lot of break and then come back to reboot them. Yeah, I think we'll get started, Jay.
Sure, absolutely. So my question to you guys, especially to you, Savy, is I think you guys have probably been seeing that design and or tech, which comes first, chicken and egg kind of scenario, right? Savy, you are an engineer by your training first time around, right? Do you
Which really is not of any use. No, I used that as a prop to do my course on product design. Honestly speaking, that's what happened. And when I was doing engineering, I really did wonder what I'll do with it because I couldn't quite, relate to it. But then, as things turned out, after my product design course and then the subsequent jobs, I've a bit of history around 20 years, if you ask me. And in all of those 20 years, I've seen that basically none of the groundbreaking tech has been driven by design, right? Design is a different process, and the people who design, right, who do design, have a different way of looking at it, right? So tech has always been, in a way, being consumed, right, in the way that was available, and all that designers were doing is basically figure out a way in which the tech can enable or realize some of their imagination and dreams, right? A little bit of it's changing right now with newer businesses and newer ways of, meeting user needs.
Let me come back to you. I think there's some interesting stuff there. Let me come back to
Sure.
you. Let me sort of open it up to the other
Sure.
panelists and kind of say that, what do you guys think? I mean, have you seen examples where design came first, or design kind of drove the technology, or technologists to adopt different ways? I mean, any examples that you guys can give?
See, I think it's not about tech is important or design is important. I think neither tech nor design is important. User is important, content is important, and we use design with help of technology to craft an experience. I think that's what matters. Ultimately, we all are making products which can make profits and be useful for consumers.
Yeah, just to add over here, so when we are talking about design and technology, what are we actually trying to do in the end? We are trying to give a solution to a user. So it's all about design thinking. And design thinking, I don't mean it is just doing a visual part or just adding to it. It is basically a solution-based thinking that you are going to do. And design and technology both work hand in hand to build something. But it kind of changes based on the context, is what my opinion would be.
And that's a great one, I think. And just hanging on to that one is my next question. I think design thinking people have been talking a lot about, and as designers, some of us have strong views on design thinking per se. So the question here is that if everyone is design thinking, what is the competitive advantage, or how is it different? I mean, everyone is design thinking, and everyone's getting certification in design thinking. So
I have a point of view about it.
yeah, sure.
And that's around the way we live in India, right? I think the fact that we lack a lot of design in our life, right, puts us in a very difficult situation, right? So IT, the one thing that IT did is basically to bring design to people quite directly, right, and be able to work on it, right? Otherwise, there were silo areas where people worked. Now, with that exposure, right, no amount of awareness about design and design thinking is less. The difference is basically being aware of user empathy versus how do you translate the awareness into a design. So that's where designers come quite handy. It requires a lot of practice and a lot of learning. So,
So just adding to it, there is a very interesting line that Tim Brown has said. It is not just about being the practitioner. It is about aiming for the mastery, right? So a lot of organizations and a lot of people are doing certifications and courses regarding design thinking. And every second organization may say that we are doing design thinking. But guys, design thinking is just a solution-based thinking, right? And it is about mastering that art. And how you can do it by just focusing on the user, the product, and consumers, and everybody around it. So that is my opinion, that it is good to be the practitioners around it, but mastery is what is most important in this case for you to survive.
So, see, design thinking as a term is right now, at this hype in India. Very few startups and companies actually keep in the core and make a process around it and follow it religiously. It's actually keeping a consumer in mind, keep in center, and keep an iterative approach and keep crafting your product. Keep making changes rather than spending 4 months, 5 months in investing a product and then going and testing in the market. You keep testing it. So it's a very simple process, but there are very few companies who value it. There are very few designers who make a mark in the boardrooms. And there are very few companies who actually invest in UED, user experience and design, as a department. Things are changing for good, but we as a ecosystem should have at least 1,000 design thinkers in our within us to make more successful products.
And I think that's a good point, kind of overall, because I think design thinking definitely, while there might seem to be an overemphasis on the certification part of it, I think it's more about probably really living it, really doing it, as opposed to having a 2 hour or a 1 day course. I think it's imbibing it. For me, a lot of it is really unlearning what our schooling systems have taught us. There is one right answer for everything. I think in design thinking, there are no right answers. There are multiple answers which lead to multiple ways. And I think that is probably the unlearning and the new ethos that you need to embrace completely. So moving on, let's talk about friction points between design and tech. I think I love that because we work in that. So Nitin, how do you see the friction points in design and tech, and how have you sorted, or how have you structured your team to deal with that?
So I think it's very obvious because various leaders have different perspectives, and perspective matters based on the KRAs and the timelines you have in the company. So for a tech guy, it's very important to make sure that the product go live in that day, and a lot of time we work backwards. We forget to.
Or just to sort of interrupt briefly, can you just take a very real Quikr example, which I think the audience can relate to, can see it in their real lives, kind of, so yeah.
So we do have various versions of mobile apps and mobile web. We do have an adaptive version of it. We do have responsive site. So from a tech perspective, it takes a lot of effort because you are maintaining 3 platforms. But from a design perspective, we cater to, as a Quikr, as a horizontal, we cater to different segments. So Quikr Jobs cater to a blue-collar segment wherein audiences are coming from using low-end mobile sets and low bandwidth. So we have to have a site which works, which we call it LEMS, which works fantastically well when the guy is on 2G. And we do have a responsive platform where we have when there is a subsequent bandwidth and users can have a jQuery and other supports. So you have that type of platform to experience that thing. But for a tech, it means that there are 2 versions of it. Initially, when we thought about it 1.5 years back when I joined, it was a difficult decision because these are 2 different teams which need to maintain 2 platforms. But for a consumer, it made sense, and we've gone with that route.
Right. Deepika? Yeah.
So I'll just add that, see, it is okay to have frictions. The reason being, any 2 people having difference of opinion is perfectly fine. I guess that happens in personal relationships also, and professional. So that should not be a holding point for anybody. But when we talk about how can we handle it, is primarily, he very well kind of said that it is more about understanding. The technology people or the engineering team hasn't been in the real world aware that how much design can add value. And if this even goes for the, I would say, the product owners, or even from the business perspective, the sales team, marketing team, your CEOs in the organization, they all need to understand the importance of design and also how it can add value, whether it is based on dollars or from the customer perspective, both ways. So that understanding is what is the most important, I would say. And yeah, you want to add
So
something?
I would like to add something here. It's very important to take a feedback from a right guy. See, when we design something, we presume that we are the users and we are the consumers, but we don't. We are just a one persona in that user base. Ultimately, it's very important to go and validate from the real world and not designing something and sitting fancy offices and rooms. It's important to go out with sales guys, with marketing guys in the field and take a real-time feedback on your product.
And it's very natural, especially in an Indian environment where the kids are born and parents tell them, you'll be either an engineer or a doctor, right? Nobody tells them that, dude, you are going to be the designer tomorrow.
Isn't that
It's changing, yeah.
It's changing. I was about to come. It's changing. But the designers that we have grown from like last 15, 20 years. So that is where I would say even the families, the way they were. So that is how nowadays engineers, when they are with you working in the organization, it is very difficult for them to accept the fact that design would lead. because design is an afterthought for them right now. It is more like either a color art or something, and it just adds value once you start working with them, once you start showing. Throughout the process, it is all about educating everybody and everyone involved into a product engagement with you, whether it is your customer, whether it is your team members on a project, or even at times with your bosses, you may have to end up doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
In my current job, we do a lot of work for banking sector. And in banking, it's a legacy system that works. And there always has been this unholy nexus between the technology that wraps the business around these sort of legacy systems, leaving the users out, right? And in today's world, if you really see, the users demand an experience that doesn't necessarily respect the technology. They don't really care. So it's always been a challenge, but over a period of time, we have learned to sort of engage engineers within our company at the right time. We don't do that at the early stage because we want the ideation to flourish on the user empathy and the thought for the emotion. But we do bring in the engineers at a point to sort of analyze, right, the feasibility, and also bring in the client technologists to tell us, what's really feasible out there. Despite that, we run into surprises, but I think it's a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, great. There's a whole bunch of new technologies coming in. I think we were just talking about it: big data, thick data, IoT, voice, input mechanisms, a whole bunch of things which are, and we are a little bit caught with like a deer in the lights kind of thing. What are the sort of skill sets that we as designers and we as product creators, whether it's designers, engineers, product managers, what do we need to do different? What do we need to think about? Because this fundamentally changes the way we interact with users. So far, we are used to pressing a button. It's a takeoff from a 3D world where there are buttons, there are knobs, there are everything. But now it's almost more human-like. I think artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. So over to you three guys. I mean, what are the new skill sets that we would need to sort of develop as product makers? And I'm not distinguishing between designers or engineers, but completely as a class of people who do that, to attempt this well.
It's extremely important for designers to understand these technologies and what's around for them to play with. But I think where it all matters is basically to figure out what emotion of a user that is going to satisfy. If you look at a Google Glass, right, it could not achieve the kind of success that it thought it will, primarily because it wasn't, basically meeting a need, a specific emotional need of the user. Whereas a similar technology with with Snapchat, seems to be having a better propensity to succeed because it has a limited duration of video that satisfies a certain emotional need of the user. So in effect, what we're saying is basically that a similar technology is coming in there, but one has a better propensity to succeed because it is more relatable to a user's need. So, and that, making the need meet through, availing some of these beautiful technologies and mechanisms out there, that I believe is what's going to have to be done with these designers, right?
I think I agree with Savy on this. See, the world is changing very fast. Somebody is innovating every day. People are changing the way they presume content or use things. And with virtual reality, AI, chatbots, things will be very different. But we have to also understand that, be aware of the current situation, understand the user, his social infrastructure, and other things to make sure that we don't make something which is ahead of time and invest a lot of things. Take a real-time example. There is a very popular real estate portal, I'll not name it, and they spent some 100 crores on their marketing campaign. And they came back with new projects for mobile. But so they invest a lot of money in making a new project section, which failed to work on mobile, on low bandwidth. This took the startup 1.5 years back, and they almost lost the edge. I'm sure a lot of you guys who belong from startup world know that which company I'm talking about. They have a very
no prizes for guessing.
They have a very cool CEO, a young one. But and they honestly created fantastic products on other fronts. But the new project had to work on mobile, because their consumers were coming from mobile.
So very quick question to you guys before we kind of open it. I think the red is kind of, we're approaching that. Briefly, I mean, any one of you can take this one. Should designers code? Should they know how to code?
I think it's very important for a designer to understand how the coders will actually translate the mock-ups or a use cases or the scenarios to real time. Otherwise, it'll be difficult. Sometimes it comes as a bottleneck, but or people say that we can't think out of the box. But it helps in my journey. It really helped me design better consumer experiences because I know technical side too.
Hey, go ahead.
Okay. Well, in my case, I haven't coded till now ever. So I would say it is not important that you should code. It is important to understand the possibilities of it, that how much code can help you. So it is about just being aware that what code can does, but it should not limit the design thinking at any point of time, is what my opinion is. So it's not, I would not recommend that it is a mandatory thing for a designer to code.
Yeah, I believe that. I don't think that designers need to code. Well, I've coded, but that doesn't mean that others should code. The point is, if code in today's world is required to sort of express a certain idea or a concept that as a designer has, then he should, right? If there's a better way to express an emotion or a concept than coding, then so be it. I think there are a number of tools, so it's really not beyond the awareness. It's not at all. In fact, it might even come in your way of thinking if you start worrying about how I will translate an idea into a reality. So for a while, when you think about ideas, it's better to shed that realism, and because eventually somebody is going to come and say and make it realistic, right? So you don't have to do that from the start. Then it gets even more watered. So coding is it's fine to be aware, but can do without it from an idea perspective.
There needs to be a sync, because if the sync is right, then only products like, I would say, Google Home or Amazon Echo would actually survive and people would end up using it. So from designer and technology perspective, it is most important, first of all, to understand in which scenario these things would be used. Why Amazon Echo is such a powerful tool, or powerful device, I should be saying. It's a simple reason. First of all, understand that how important it is, in which scenarios. Are there alternatives also available for a situation where voice cannot work? And what is important for voice is just recognition and understanding. So if it's a voice input and the output is an audio output for you, right? So in this scenario, your system needs to have that understanding that it can reciprocate based on what you are asking it.
Yeah, so I think I have a very empathetic panel who empathize with each other and with, so that's great. I think at this point, let me open it out for the audience. I think we'll take 2 questions. You know the people, you can always discuss more outside over lunch or so on. There is, of course, the Twitter handles that you can reach out to us as well. More than happy. But any questions from the audience? Yeah. Can we get the mic, or just mic over to him? Yeah, sure. Here we go. You got one.
Got a mic. Hi. How important is you're talking all about user experiences, but how important is knowing the user from, say, for example, from the accessibility point of view, or who receives the designs that you actually are creating out there? Purely from the technology point of view, there are standards met for accessibility, but in design perspectives per se, how important is accessibility in all this? I mean, all of us know what accessibility is, because there's a huge bunch of users out there who are differently abled, who are aged. The growing number of old people using phones is so increasing. How important is design there?
I think in India there are very few companies, at least from startup community, who's following the accessibility guidelines. But yes, in case you are addressing to that audience, and you're targeting that audience, then it becomes very important, not even from technology, even from a design, to understand the process and understand the circumstances and the way people are going to consume and which devices they're going to use. So it's a hell out of an essential step.
Just to add to that, I think, yes, in the startup world, I think maybe the emphasis is less. Having said that, in more mature companies, I think that varies quite a bit. If I were to take the example of my previous stint at Adobe, I think that was a very, very sort of thing, a detailed aspect for us. Again, it differs. I mean, if you think of Photoshop and visually impaired, that's probably a wrong combination. I mean, that doesn't really go exactly. But there are a lot of other softwares that Adobe makes, for instance, where accessibility becomes very important. And I think we would do that. Interestingly, we found a bunch of other learnings and other things from accessibility, coding for accessibility, which were useful for tutoring people. And I think that was like an offbeat, offshoot thing, but that's very key. And I think we should definitely pay attention. I think part of the reason why the startup world might not pay so much attention is because of the fragment. A lot of them are focused on the mobile ecosystem, but the fragmentation in the OS itself is enormous. Fragmentation in the OS, fragmentation in the devices, capabilities, so on and so forth, is an enormous one. I mean, it's crazy actually. So I think in that scenario, I do see less. Having said that, this actually is a huge opportunity for people to sort of go and do something. So if any of you are potential startup founders looking for a new idea, this is like a huge area, because there is voice, there is geolocation capabilities, there are so many. Each sensor is almost like a business opportunity in itself. So accessibility is, yes, it's not been addressed, and yes, it should actually be a big opportunity area as well.
And just to add, I've realized that a lot of people may not know that iPhone actually has a accessibility option for you to kind of switch it on and access any of the apps.
Yeah.
Hello. This is more on Deepika's point on whether one should know how to code or not. I'm neither a coder nor a designer. But my understanding is design is more of a right brain thingy, and coding skill is more of a left brain. Is there ample supply of ambidextrous talent in the industry that people know both how to code and to design? Thank you.
Sorry, could you just come up with the last part?
Is there enough supply of people who are well versed in design as well as who are good coders? I mean, who are both?
I'm sure there would be. I would not know, but
I mean, this is not just for you. This is for others also.
My focus is being just aware that what code can do, and definitely there are feasibility checks which are done at regular point of time when you are prototyping your product, taking it out to the real users, testing it, doing a feasibility check with the technical team, but that doesn't push the designer to actually go up and end up doing the code by themselves to showcase their idea.
In my opinion, it's really not important to have both skills together. There may be people out there who have started one way or the other and have had both capabilities, but it's not necessary. What is really important is to make sure that there is a level of awareness of either side, and respect. The right brain that we talk about is the artistic part, but we must realize that it's a lot more. When we talk about creativity or innovation, it's about the ability to understand the user need and create a solution to that problem. So it's not just that. So in that sense, people understand it better, right? And you can make things meet. It need not necessarily be through a single brain.
And realistically, a user would not know. User, as in a designer, would not know whether his right brain is right now active or left brain is active when they're designing it.
Just to add to that, I think I'll differ from you guys slightly. I would say that I think it's a great advantage to have someone who can do a bit of both. I have had a chance to hire a lot of people and I would willingly and happily hire anyone who probably understands coding or engineering and various aspects of it, but may not be totally bound by that. Someone who wants to, so I have a bunch of people, or used to have a bunch of people, both in Flipkart and Adobe and earlier, where they would actually be coders who were very keen and very inspired to learn design. And I think they make some of the best guys because they have a very logical bent of mind, because design in tech is not really art. It is more about sort of transforming some of the constraints to sort of make it feasible for the user. So if you have user empathy, some amount of visual thinking, and a logical bent of mind, I think that's great. I understand that more being a designer in a VC, because I'm the only guy who's possibly the right-brain guy, but I'm actually not right-brain. I do understand a bit of finance, and I've done an MBA. And I'm also ambidextrous, really, so that helps. But I think that's always a good thing, because in today's world, as we go increasingly, I think you need to sort of understand a couple of different spheres. And I think that is true for anything, kind of, whether you understand business and engineering, business and design, design and engineering, sort of power to you if you guys can do that.
Yeah, understanding is what I totally agree. And designers also need to focus on the business, which a lot of designers don't do. They kind of miss out on the business goal or the business of the product also.
Great. I think you guys been a great audience. I will probably wrap up here. And thank you so much. I didn't see many people move out from the back, not like Snapchat, 30 seconds and out.
We use
so
Fevicol.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Sort of
guys.
applause for the team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, for such an interesting and insightful discussion. We're going to move on to the next session.